Three things are certain in life: death, taxes, and northern Italian clubs dominating Serie A. When we talk about dominating sides from northern Italy, it's generally Juventus, Inter Milan, and AC Milan. But there is another club from Turin, often overlooked, but was one of the most successful football clubs of 20th century and was arguably best football team in Italy during 1940s. Torino Football Club, or as they were known in the 1940s, Il Grande Torino, were the kings of Italian football. They were miles ahead of any other side in Serie A. In their decade, Torino were collecting trophies like postcards, and their fan base massive, their influence massive, the gap between Torino and everyone else massive. By 1948, they had secured 4 consecutive league titles. They played with a flair and intensity which was simply unmatched. What made this team truly remarkable was their influence on the national level. By the time they peaked, most of the Italian national team was made up of Torino players. Despite no European competition at that time, Torino were very popular across Europe or even in South American countries like Brazil and Uruguay. They were considered untouchable and had no signs of decline. But their story, as glorious as it was, would end in heartbreak. An entire generation of footballing talent lost in Superga air disaster. But before we talk more about their glorious past and the biggest tragedy in their history, let me start our story with the inception of Torino Football Club and their path to become Il Grande Torino, the greatest football team you might have never heard of. Torino, right from its inception, has a very strong rivalry with Juventus. Both clubs fight for bragging rights of the city, and it is also the oldest derby in Italian football, known as Derby della Mole. In fact, the birth of Torino Football Club itself is connected to Juventus. In 1897, Juventus was formed. They joined the Italian Football Championship in 1900 and won their first title in 1905. In 1906, Alfred Dick, the then Juventus president, left the club after disagreements with the board. Along with other dissidents, he made an alliance with FC Torinese to form a new club, Torino Football Club. Just months later, Torino faced Juventus in their first derby, winning 2-1 on December 16, 1906, and then again on January 13, 1907 by 4-1. Historically, Torino has enjoyed more local support, more than its local rival and Italy's richest club, Juventus. But in its earlier years, it was a huge challenge for Torino to compete in the Italian Championship, a time when AC Milan, Inter Milan and Genoa were all dominating the league, and Juventus, who even back then had a wealthier owner and a stronger team. But Torino progressed steadily and in just few years started finishing in the top 4 consistently. In the 1914-15 season, Torino were just 2 points behind Genoa with 4 matches to play. But the league was suspended due to World War I and Genoa were awarded the title. When the league resumed in 1918, like many clubs, Torino had lost several players to the war. But the progress continued. On October 17, 1926, Torino opened their iconic Philadelphia Stadium with a 4-0 win over Fortitudo Roma. No, not this Roma, but this one. The 1926-27 season saw Torino win what appeared to be their first Scudetto, but it was later revoked due to allegations of bribery involving a Juventus player. Undated, Torino came back strong, winning their first official Scudetto the following year. While the club failed to defend the title next year and even declined in the early 1930s, but the things started to get better in the late 30s and marked the beginning of a resurgence that would see them become one of Italy's footballing powerhouse. In 1938-39 season, Torino finished second. But this time, it was not a 1 or 2 good season run. This was the early days of what will become the golden generation of Torino Football Club. Arno Agri Epstein became their manager in 1938, whose ideas were going to revolutionize Italian football. Epstein introduced new training methods that emphasized player fitness, studied the playing styles of opponents, and promoted a more fluid brand of football. All these started from training ground and daily routines. But his tenure was cut short when he and his family were forced to flee Italy in less than a year due to the anti-Semitic laws passed by Benito Mussolini's fascist government, making it illegal for Jewish people to work in the country. He returned to Hungary but was captured in 1944 by Nazi forces and was kept in a concentration camp. Although later he successfully escaped the camp, Epstein's departure, however, did not stop Torino from their ambitious goals. Instead, his ideas and foundations played a key role in Torino's success in the next decade. And 1939 was still a turning point of Torino when Ferruccio Novo, a former player and lifelong Torino fan, became their president. Novo wasted no time implementing his vision. He focused on building a long-term foundation for the club, investing heavily in young talents who could help in creating a super team in the future, along with the established best players. Novo also restructured the entire club, from the coaching staff to the recruitment team, ensuring that everyone and everything was aligned with his vision. His financial investments in player signings, wages, and in overall structure were also significant. His plans and methods were very different to how other clubs operated, even the big ones. But for Novo, it was the fastest but still not a risky way to become the dominant side in the league. They changed many coaches in Novo's first few years as president, but his vision and plan were still going in the same direction. And in just 2-3 years, the results were clearly visible. They finished second in 1942, losing the title to AS Roma by just 3 points. But by 1942, they had established a very formidable side. In the summer of 1941, they had signed 5 new players: Romeo Menti from Fiorentina, Pietro Ferreris from Inter Milan, and 3 from Juventus: Alfredo Boderia, Felicio Borrell, Guillermo Gabetto. Guillermo Gabetto and Romeo Menti were particularly statement signings, especially when both of them were key part of Juventus and Fiorentina respectively. In 1942, they signed Valentino Mazzola and Ezio Loic from Venezia. They continued their impressive partnership with Torino. Valentino Mazzola was arguably their best signing under Novo. He could go on to captain the team, became the heart and soul of Torino, and is widely regarded as the greatest player in the history of Torino. On the top of their star-studded squad, Torino's football and tactics were also different and more advanced than other Italian clubs. Their tactics were inspired by Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman's Sistema formation. This style made Torino unpredictable and fluid, with players seamlessly interchanging positions, something rarely seen in Serie A at the time. Not just the formation, the pressing, passing, and even fitness were on a different level compared to other teams. Although they had a poor start in 1942-43 season, but as the season progressed, it was clearly visible that Torino were a far superior side than any other club in Serie A, with both their performance and results. All the foundations laid by Agri Epstein on the pitch and decisions of Ferruccio Novo were finally paying off, and Torino went on to win the Serie A in 1943. In the wake of World War I, the league had to be stopped for next 2 years. But when football resumed in 1945, Torino picked up right where they left off. They won the league in 1946, then again in 1947, and then again in 1948. 4 consecutive league titles, just on another dimension post-World War II, and they were on course to win their 5th consecutive Scudetto in 1949. In 1946, Agri Epstein also returned to Italy and came back to Torino as the technical director. Under Epstein's second spell, they became an even stronger and dominant side. They became Il Grande Torino, arguably the greatest Italian side till the 1950s. They won the 1946-47 league title with a 10-point gap on the last day, and in the next season, an even bigger gap. They were making and breaking records after records, many of them still stand today. In the 1947-48 season, they scored 125 goals in 40 matches. In that season, they also recorded a 10-0 win over Alessandria, which to this day remains the biggest win in Serie A. During their 5 seasons from 1942-43 to 48-49, they scored 471 goals and did not lose a single home match for 5 consecutive seasons. What made Grande Torino even more special was their impact on Italian football and their connection with the working class. In the post-war era, when Italy was struggling with poverty, Torino offered hope and excitement, a sense of community and joy to every section of fans. Their entertaining style, filled with individual brilliance, made them very popular among the masses, and their players, who despite enjoying such a fame and success, were also very much connected with the fans. It was common to see Torino players in local restaurants, shops, and even hanging out with fans. The Italy side was also largely composed of Torino players, and even the system used by the national team at that time was very similar to Torino's style. At one point, 10 of the 11 national team players were from Torino. They were so good in almost every aspect that it looked very unlikely that any other club could overtake them in near future. Though European competitions did not existed, their fame was growing beyond Italy, attracting attention not just in Europe but even places like Brazil and Uruguay. The 1948-49 season was just like the last four, with Torino on the brink of their fifth consecutive Scudetto. On April 30, 1949, they faced title rivals Inter Milan. A win would give them a 6-point lead in the title race. While Torino was still in the title race, they were approached by Benfica to play a friendly in their home stadium after Torino's fixture at San Siro with Inter Milan. Torino agreed, but on the condition that they will play only if they beat Inter. Which happened, they beat Inter Milan and held a clear 6-point lead ahead of Inter Milan in the league table, with only 4 games remaining. After their victory, they made the trip to Lisbon. Most of the squad, including captain Valentino Mazzola, who had missed the Inter game due to illness, made the journey. Only a few players, like backup goalkeeper Renato Gandolfi and defender Sauro Toma, stayed behind. President Faricio Novo also missed the trip due to flu. The squad and staff were also joined by a few journalists in the flight to Lisbon, and they all were also coming back together to Turin. On their return flight from Lisbon, tragedy struck. Bad weather and thick fog caused the plane to crash into the Basilica of Superga just outside Turin. There were no survivors. All 31 people on board, including the players, coaching staff, and journalists, perished. The Grande Torino, who were Italy's greatest footballing side till yesterday, doesn't exist anymore. The news of plane crash shocked the whole football world. The city of Turin was mourning, grieving the loss of their footballing heroes. With 4 matches remaining, Torino were awarded Scudetto before the season is finished, but Torino still proceeded to play remaining 4 matches. As almost the entire team and coaching staff were vanished, Torino played the rest of 4 matches with the youth players and the only 2 remaining players of Grande Torino, defender Sauro Toma and the reserve goalkeeper Renato Gandolfi. Although out of respect, the opponents also played mostly with the youth and reserve players. Torino ended the season with their 5th consecutive Scudetto. But after that, they had a huge challenge ahead, rebuilding the squad to replace the Grande Torino. A very big uncertainty to defend the Scudetto or be anywhere close to a title race. After the crash, Torino faced the impossible task of rebuilding. Even if you compare their situation with like Manchester United's plane crash, which was also a huge tragedy, but they still got the likes of Sir Bobby Charlton and Bill Fox to keep up the spirit and help in rebuilding the team around them. And at that point, there was also not a fear of a city rival catching up immediately. But Torino had almost no key players, coaches, or technical staff left to lead them forward. They had to start everything from scratch. While no team had come close to challenging the mighty Grande Torino, now several clubs were eyeing the Scudetto, and Juventus, historically dominant, were ready to take back the city. The trauma of that tragedy itself was huge, and then the challenge of rebuilding everything. It's not that they did not receive any support from other clubs or the league. Every club was ordered to give at least one player from its team to Torino, which all clubs also happily agreed to, but none of them gave them their best players. At best, it was just an average team, not even remotely resembling the dominant Il Grande Torino. The president turned to the youth academy, and new signings like Benjamin Santos, Jal Marsan, and Cara Palace joined. They appointed Oberdan Oselo as the head coach, who was the youth team coach for just 1 year. Him and technical director Robert Copernicus were given the charge of the first team coaching. But as everyone expected, it was not enough to stay on top, replicating the tactics or flair of Epstein's Grande Torino. President Novo had an idea to again assemble a team of stars which can dominate Serie A, but financial constraints and lack of top quality players forced Torino to settle for lower ambitions and a more modest style of football, falling far short of their glorious past. The decline was visible just from next season. Like last 4 years, they started the season as the defending champions. But not only they missed on the title this time, they finished 6th and finished 17th the next season. Over the next decade, their best results were 6th place in 1950 and 7th in 1957. Just 10 years after their 5th consecutive Scudetto, Torino were relegated to Serie B. They came back to Serie A just after 1 season, but their charm was gone. Mid-table finishes, a Coppa Italia win in 1968, but no serious title challenges. But in 1976, they finally won the Scudetto, their last till date. Though they remained competitive in the late 70s, the decline continued. Torino relegated again in 1990, although again came back in next year. In 1963, Torino left their historic home, the Philadelphia Stadium, for sharing a ground with Juventus. While the Philadelphia has since been rebuilt for youth and occasional first team matches, but the idea to return their first home ground permanently has been more or less abandoned. Apart from on pitch struggles, the club also met with some major financial problems over last few decades. In the summer of 1992, they had to sell several of its key players, which became the reason of their next relegation. In 2005, Torino were declared bankrupt and relegated to Serie B. Urban Cairo acquired the club and the team were promoted back to Serie A in 2006. Since becoming their president, Cairo has been more pragmatic and careful in handling the affairs of the club and for on-pitch decisions to ensure the club does not experience another financial disaster. Since moving from Serie B to Serie A in 2013, the club has not faced another relegation, but their best position since then is 7th. So while it ensures stability in club and obviously more logical approach, but it also means not moving further up on the table. And we may never see the Grande Torino back, at least in the near future. When I first came across this story, I was really surprised that how I did not have any idea about their glorious history and especially El Grande Torino. And more I read about that side, their dominance and their popularity, I can only wonder what could have been had that crash never happened.